Going. Where's that name as well? Perfect. Welcome back, Mike. Good to good to speak with you again. Good to see you.
I am happy to be here. I think we were talking a little bit before we hopped on and started recording that it's a little bit of a different experience for an Everton fan being like enthusiastic to talk about the team for the first time in years.
It does feel like it's a difference. Yeah. There's been a drudgery, I think, to some of our some of our conversations in the past. Yeah, sometimes you've come on and gone like everyone thinks this, but actually I'm gonna tell you why they're wrong and defended people on the hill like Sean Dyche, but
So yeah,
now you
I,
can
look,
enjoy.
I I think what I want to say is that for years I've come on here, sort of once or twice a year, and I've said the thing about Everton is they need to not die. That was what was at stake.
Yeah,
I am
very
not
true.
concerned with them being good. I am concerned with them continuing to exist as a going entity past this season. And
Yeah.
so, to that end, Sean Dyche making them miserable to watch but not relegated was, to my
Hmm.
mind, a giant success.
Yeah.
This year, I come here, new stadium. You know, the economic crunch is in the past, new
Hmm.
owners, no points deductions, and I could just talk about them being a soccer team or a football team, and it's just very nice. It's just very nice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure there'll be Liverpool listeners listening to this, sort of happy. I think, and no, I think they will be happy, whilst also, like hoping that there's a moment that Everton fans can still find energy to boo for. That probably be the derby. Let's face it. But I wanted to ask you. I mean, like last season. What was your favorite moment of last season? Like, if I had to ask you to pick something out, I mean, even maybe it could be since Moyes has returned, obviously. Yeah, like
Oh,
could
I
be
mean,
on the pitch, off the pitch, whatever.
yeah, I think in keeping with what I was with what I've been talking about, like the ownership deal getting done was for me the it is sort of unavoidable in modern football that who owns you, how much money you have, the way the team is run, all of these things matter a lot. And it's just like true that getting real owners with real money through the door at Everton
Mm,
was a huge deal. The trajectory of this club, if 777 had been the ones to buy
yeah.
them versus what actually happened, it's just night and day. And it is the most dramatic difference. I can sort of think of two moments in the last 3 or 4 years. One is Decore scoring a goal on the final day of the season so Everton don't get relegated, and the other one is the current ownership group. And those two things have really, really just massive moments in the trajectory of Everton.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's not even. I'm not surprised that you went for that as opposed to like an on the pitch moment, of which there were quite a few, like towards the end of the season. Let's face it. But I think yeah, I think as you've said, coming on here talking about the trajectory of the club, not having, or just the relief of not having to sort of be concerned about existence, can just be just enjoying kind of sort of how the team can grow and develop. And I remember when we did chat, you were speaking about, because I alluded to it earlier on, right? We were speaking about Sean Dyche, you felt did what was necessary to sort of keep Everton alive in the period where they needed that. And David Moyes came in. There was like considerable kind of impact when he first arrived. I think we were speaking about, okay, maybe how long is this impact necessarily going to last? What does the team need to keep growing? I think it's fair to say, I think by the end of the season, like percentages of win and draws, like probably roughly around 79-80% in terms of like games as he came in. The goals conceded like drops down a little bit as well. The goals scored goes up. All the metrics you'd want to be submitting like are looking healthier. What was your thought, like, by the time the final whistle went, the last game of the season, on how he'd done?
I mean, I think David Moyes did fine as manager. Good. I think he came in after a very difficult stretch of the schedule. He got an easier stretch of the schedule. I think there were some sort of statistical things that are relatively outside of manager's control that also turned around. Um, It's not unusual, for example, that a managers often get fired when a team is running cold, and running cold doesn't last forever. Um, but that said, there was a mismatch in attitude by the end of Sean Dyche's time, right? Like Sean Dyche was like came in and is like, "You're not gonna like it, but I'm gonna get I'm gonna get miserable points and not get relegated." And new ownership, David Moyes comes in, and they absolutely played a different brand of football. And I think that one of the things that's pretty funny about Moyes' term two at Everton is that I am old enough to remember the end of David Moyes' first stint at Everton, where he was run out of town. I mean, he got the Manchester United job, so there was a pretty like large, you can't, you can't break up with me. I'm breaking up with you sentiment from the from Everton faithful. But a lot of it was like, I am sick and tired of Moyes saying we need to be happy with a point, that we need to be defensive, that I'm making the most of my resources. And that was exactly the attitude around Deitch at the end of Sean Deitch's much shorter term than David Moyes' first stint at Everton. And I think Moyes as a manager is somewhat different than he was during his first time. I mean, if you look at his successful time at West Ham, they were not what you would consider a particularly defensive or grindy or negative team. Um, they get up and down more. They get more shots. They want to score. Now, look, they're not. I would not say they are a possession based brand of football, right? They're not looking to keep the ball, use the ball, and work the ball to create attacks. But they are aggressive. They want to score. They will get bodies forward, even if the way you move the ball up the field is still primarily like, hey, Beto is a really big guy, and you can kick the ball to the really big guy, and the really big guy will keep the ball. Like, even if that's how they move the ball up the field, there is an investment in having an attacking players on the field and getting bodies up the field who can then contribute to attack. So, you know, all of that is a different attitude. It's a different plan, and it's a more fun plan to watch. It's also a plan that's a lot easier to execute when you're not battling for relegation. It's also a plan that's a lot more easy to execute now that you've had a summer of both short-term and long-term investment in the squad, which I think still leaves holes. And we'll talk about them when we talk about the manager. There are plenty of holes in this Everton side, but the holes are ones that lead to more fun, kind of. And if you're fine, like if you're not worried about occasionally turning 1 point into 0 points being the difference between survival and the obliteration of your football club, that's okay. Like and fun is good. Like it's good to enjoy watching the team.
Yeah, very much. I cannot emphasize that enough. And actually, I was just reminded of the conversation I was having with one of the guys from the No Nay Never podcast, which is that sort of Burnley podcast that we speak to when um, often in the season, and they were talking about the different approaches, right? So company, the approach that he took, then how fun that was in the championship, how like kind of galling it became in the Premier League because it obviously was incredibly hard to execute that style and you'd have better quality players. Um, Him then departing, Scott Parker coming in, Scott Parker's approach, the defensive like stats that he managed to put up, obviously. Then you look at the game itself and go, wow, that really is. I mean, yes, it's Burnley against Liverpool, absolutely, but I can't remember a more defensive like kind of approach in a game like that, and was
Well,
reminded almost what you
yeah,
said about take your medicine. Like, if this keeps us up, it keeps us up.
one of the things that you find when you talk to supporters of sort of yo-yo clubs, right, is
Mm.
that they'll tell you, man, I had really fun. I had a lot more fun those 1 or 2 years in the championship, but we were the best team.
Yeah.
And it is a tense and miserable experience than when you're at the
Mm.
bottom of the Premier League. Now,
Like Norwich fans, like Norwich fans, I feel like that is like that 1,000%. Whenever I speak to them, they go, "We hate the Premier League. Whenever we come up here, we get battered, and then we go back down there, and then generally speaking, it's gone okay. Like right now, it's not going okay, but like generally speaking, it's like it's gone okay." And I remember they kept going up and like, is it worth it? Like, is it
So
actually
now
worth it?
the group that I think of a lot are Fulham fans, and
Yes.
to some degree that's because there's weirdly a bunch of Fulham fans in America. I mean,
No.
because
Clint
there were
Dempsey,
some,
right?
yeah,
Mm.
Dempsey, Brian McBride, but
Mm.
what they did, they expressed that. I've heard that sentiment expressed by them when they went down and came back up. But the other thing that they've done is they came out the top of the relegation battling strata in the Premier League, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot more pleasant when you're like, "Hey, we're a mid-table team that's not going to get relegated. Maybe we can even compete for a place in the European positions." Like that's fun again, and to me, that's where Everton are headed, or maybe already are. And the sense of like enjoyment you get from getting back to that strata from the relegation battling is it's a different fan experience, and it's just a lot. You when you're battling at the bottom, you almost dread watching your team every week because the magnitude of things going wrong is so much higher than the magnitude of things going right. And like, if things go wrong for Everton on a given weekend this year, right now, I don't have to freak out about it. It's not an existential crisis, right? It's like, oh, yeah, no, man, like they didn't manage to get a goal against Aston Villa, so they only got 1 point. Like that, on to the next one.
No, exactly. Yeah, the stakes suddenly become very different, and yeah, as well as you mentioning sort of the relief in the fan base that provides as well. I often think as well that you can tell right when you watch a football team on the pitch. Oh, these guys hate playing with each other. Like they're really unhappy. Like at this, it's usually later in the season. Let's face it. But like it's like they resent each other. There's some things going on here that like this guy doesn't trust this guy. He's fed up of this guy's first touch, whatever it might be, and it feels like Everton are very much not in that phase right now. There's a group of players who are excited to play with each other, as you mentioned, maybe kind of aware of some of the holes that exist, but aware of some of the flair that exists and some of the opportunity that provides as well. When I think of kind of the situation you're describing, a team turning up week after week, really not looking like they're enjoying themselves, and
Well, I
fans in
mean,
it is United, right? That's
yeah,
the team that I'm thinking about.
sure. I mean, it's a notable difference for Everton that the holes in this squad all of a sudden are at the back.
Hmm.
There are not holes in the front four of this team right now.
No,
This is a
settled.
it's a settled deep group. Maybe they don't have. I mean, Jack Grealish is top end attacking talent, but for the most part, you look at those guys, they're not like, oh, they're superstars, or oh, I think they're going to get a big move to a top five club, or something like that. But they're good players. They're good players who are good attackers who know how to attack and play well together, and it's a well constructed group. The holes in this team are further back in the field. They're in midfield, they're at fullback, they're center back to a certain degree right now because of injury, and it's a complete role reversal, right? Where in previous years you're just like praying that Dominic Calvert-Lewin can get out of his own way. Well, you have five center backs, and now you have a little bit of the reverse.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit then, because I think there's other things, there's some things I do want to talk about. So obviously the new stadium as well, and some of the impact that will bring. But at the end of last season, looking at the squad and sort of the areas that needed to be addressed, and you've alluded to some of the holes already. The business that was then done in terms of the transfers that come in is exciting. I have to say that the vast majority of these signings, like, they make sense. They're young, malleable
Yeah,
players. Tyler Dibbling from Southampton for quite a big fee. Was like for
forty
I'm in.
million.
I'm in Europe here at the moment, so like all my prices are suddenly switched to euros, so 40 million euros. Like, you got Tiano Barry, 30 million from Villarreal, centre forward. Yeah, Kieran Dewsbury Hall freed from the bench of Chelsea to come and play for Everton. 26 years old, a bit older, but actually, I thought that was a good deal as well for about 28. Carlos Alcaraz, that's been made permanent. Big fan of Carlos Alcaraz, actually. And Jack Grealish, as you mentioned, you talk about players being freed.
Yeah. So
Yeah, being
I
freed.
think
Let me know
the
what you
interesting
think.
combination of all of those guys is there's a really nice mix, right? You have a number of younger players who are look, I don't know that like I like Carlos Alcaraz compared to what they had. I don't know that he's ever going to be a
No, you
great
don't know yet.
or good Premier League player, but he's young and interesting, right? And the same goes for Tyler Dibbling in that way. And they build on top of like an Injai, right? Burry is also that. These are guys who are reasonable risks to take at a young age. And I would add, the Merlin Roll, the midfielder who they brought in from Germany. I would add Asno to that category as well. These are all guys, and like, look, some of them are not going to work out. Some of them are going to turn out to be ultimately prospects who are not good enough to play at a Premier League level, certainly at a mid-table Premier League level, and that's okay, right? That's why you take a lot of those bets. But what they've done on top of that is Garrett Dewsbury Hall was the perfect guy in his prime signing who is not quite good enough for the team he's at, but makes you immediately better. Um, in Jack Grealish is a guy who I would have come on here and told you if they had bought him and were like now responsible for his future, uh, was not a good signing for the price. But on loan, where like you don't have to worry about the fact that when he's 29, 30, 31, his production is going to decline and he's on big wages, where you just get to watch him touch the ball all season for one season and, worry about then creating, bringing in somebody for the long term in the future who can like hit those levels. That's
Yeah,
that's a
there's no obligation to buy
There's no
there.
obligation.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That makes tons of sense. It is a smart way it's a smart bit of business and a smart way to run a team when he's on loan. And Moyes has obviously recognized what Jack Grealish is, and this team, like, you know, in the final third, the team is get the ball to Jack Grealish. If you are not Jack Grealish, why are you not? Why does Jack Grealish not have the ball? Pass the ball to Jack Grealish, and it should be right. Like it absolutely should be. That is a smart way to run an attack. So you have all these pieces, in the attacking part of the field. You have depth, you have talent, you have youth. It's nobody's going to mistake it for a top six attack or anything, but it is a good way to create an attack, and it's a really good way to turn an attack that had been one of the 4 or 5 worst in England for 5 years into something that's mid-table or mid-table plus.
Yeah, no, when you mentioned Grealish there, I mean, I think yeah, all the points are correct around sort of the lack of risk with it being a loan signing. Also, just the fond kind of feeling I get by thinking about. I mean, it's been quite clear how kind of rejuvenated Jack Grealish has seemed. As you mentioned, get the ball to Jack Grealish and he'll figure out like what we're doing from a creative sense. I'm just thinking about that's probably been Jack Grealish's life since he was on the playground, and then it
That's right.
and then
I
it
mean,
wasn't for a bit, and
yeah. I
now
mean, if
now
you
he's
look
come
at
back and it's the same.
if you look at his time at Aston Villa, like that
That
was
was the
the
plan.
attack. A
Yeah.
100% that was the attack. And then he goes to Manchester City, and I think his time at Manchester City is a little bit underrated because
Hmm.
while the goals and assists weren't necessarily there, he still did a tremendously good job of bringing the ball in the final third into the penalty area. And he was really effective at that thing that was asked of him. But
What was
he
asked
was
of him was not kind of here. Yeah.
right.
What?
Right. And I think it's sort of you don't really want to do too much analyzing these guys from afar, but I think it clearly wore on him and it
Hmm.
wore on the relationship at him. And clearly he's a guy who is more fulfilled by his footballing when the attack revolves around him. And he has the skill set to do it on, like, I don't know, 90% of teams in the world. So put him on one of those teams instead of one of the 10% teams where probably you shouldn't be doing that because, like, you have Kevin De Bruyne on the other side of the field and Erling Haaland on top of the attack. And, I think it was right to question whether or not he still had the capacity to do this in
Yeah.
him. And I think it's still right to question whether he has the capacity to do this for the entire length of a season.
Yeah.
But certainly for the opening month, he's been great. Like he's just been great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm also kind of watching to see, okay, will that intensity, will that I don't want to use professionalism to kind of bash him, but we do, you kind of know Jack, like some of the reports around Jack
Right.
Grealish, like is he going to be professional for the entire season? I hope he is because I think yeah, he clearly is a great talent when he's feeling confident and loved. And I think that's obviously why he's pursued the move as well. You mentioned Kieran Dewsbury-Hall again, somebody I always thought of as you said, like a solid player for a certain kind of club in the Premier League, and it was a bit of a shame to see him kind of be wasted on the bench at Chelsea. It didn't seem like there was much in the
Yeah,
way of
so
logic about that signing, but yeah,
a Chelsea supporting friend of mine described it as the kind of transfer where the average talent of both teams goes up
goes
when
this
it
goes up.
when it happens, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's right. Dewsbury Hall is he's a very good passer. He's a very good possession player. He gives you more defensive work as a 10 than most 10s would. The problem is he's probably not good enough to play as a 10 in a sort of Champions League spots contending team. And then you try to move him back to an 8, and his defensive work is a little light. His possession work is not quite aggressive enough, and he becomes a tweener, right? Like he's not quite good enough to be an 8 versus the typical 8 you'll find at the top of the table, and he's not quite good enough to be a 10 versus the typical 10s you'll find at the top of the table. But further down, when you put him in and around the penalty area for an Everton or for Leicester City, he's better than most players you will find in those roles. So I think he's come in and he's immediately made the attack just, you know, there are certain guys who knit things together in the final third, and it doesn't necessarily show up in their um, goals and assists. It doesn't necessarily show up in their defensive statistics, but it shows
Hmm.
up in the way the team is more cohesively able to create chances when they're on the field. You know, at a higher level, a guy who I think of in that mold is like a Roberto Firmino. That his pressing work and his ability to knit things together in the final third sort of always made him more valuable to the team than the output of goals and assists that he would have. And obviously Liverpool figured out a brilliant system to make all of that work together. But there's a bit of that element to Dewsbury Hall where you put him there and like Grealish is going to be on the ball a lot. In Beto and Barry, you have strikers whose like primary thing is like we get the shots, and then you need somebody who is there to sort of keep possession ticking over in dangerous attacking areas of the field. And I think Dewsbury Hall's like a perfect fit for that.
So in terms of the holes that you mentioned, into the sort of like in this squad there, you would say they're more defensive at the moment. You're not concerned at all. I'm not asking you to be concerned by the centre forward options that are being fed at the moment. Like it has like Beto and Bury being enough for
I
this
mean, it
season.
depends. It depends what we're talking about. I think Burry is a really good prospect.
Yeah.
I think he's not great right now, but he's young. And he was quite good at a fairly high level last year in Spain. I think
Yeah.
for the price, I love him as a prospect.
Okay.
And Beto is, I don't know, 15% worse than what I'd want ideally, right? But I think in the grand scope of things, when you look at mid-table teams, when you look at teams that have battled relegation, it's pretty hard to just find okay
Yeah.
guys to play at striker. And I think he got two of them. And I think when that's the case, like for years you've looked at the Everton squad and been like, okay, what is a major problem that needs to be addressed, and what is just like not quite as good enough as I might want it to ultimately be, which is then a priority. Like, which, given the amount of things that Everton have had to do, you relegate that second category to the back of the line, right? And striker to
Yeah.
me right now is like,
Back of the
I,
line.
it might just sort itself out with Barry, right? He just might be a guy who you're going to get 5 years of good production and sell for a lot of money. He might not, but I mean, I think that going down that path makes sense. And if you're going down that path, then Beto is a fine guy to be the guy in front of him. So in the scope of things that concern me, the fact that
It's
the fact that Everton have yet to play any fullbacks this season concerns me a lot more.
I was gonna say, yeah, the fullback situation, a curious, a curious thing, and also the midfield. Again, looking at the um, uh,
Midfield is a
the
yeah,
never aging
yeah,
Drissagana
yeah.
game
So
who is starting to
yeah,
age.
midfield is a big problem. Although part of what I'd say is that midfield is a problem is at least a little bit downstream of the fullback problem because James Garner is starting at left back and James Garner is a midfielder. Um, so if Mikolenko gets healthy and you have Garner to deploy in midfield, it makes two spots better at once. But yes, the place they struck out this summer that they really needed to add somebody was midfield. They added attackers, they added attacking midfielder, winger types. They needed a center midfielder and they didn't get it. So they're quite thin in the middle of the field. And
And what kind of centre midfielder do you think that they
well, I think they need two. I mean, they need somebody who can be who can inherit the destroyer role from Ghana, right? They
Mhm.
need somebody who is not 36 years old, who can get around the field, break up play, and win possession of the ball back. That's their primary job. And then ideally next to them you pair somebody who's good in possession, right? Somebody who the things I was talking about Dewsbury Hall doing in the final third, you would like somebody doing in the middle of the park. Settling the ball when you win the ball back, playing it out to the wing to move the ball up the field. You don't need somebody who's like a super ball progressor when you're Everton. You don't need somebody who the attack runs through them or anything. But you want somebody to play next to a destroyer who can do the simple things in possession, right? Like who can maybe recycle the ball, maybe get the ball out to the wing, maybe like play the ball that launches a counter attack, and is also like solid in possession. Um, to me, those guys tend to be, like the canonical example of this is the Leicester City team with Conte and Drinkwater. Drinkwater wasn't a very good player, but you put a great defender, and then what Drinkwater does is he just does all the simple stuff well in the middle of the field. And so Everton could really Garner could do that somewhat when he's there in midfield, but you'd want somebody who is either a little bit better than Garner or has a little more of an exciting career path possibility than Garner. Garner is fine, and you don't want your best case scenario to be fine. To analogize it to the attack, having Beto is okay because he's like fine because you have the possibility of Barry behind him. Garner is fine, but there's nobody on this squad who really has an exciting prospect behind him that you're hoping becomes the guy. So you need some of that.
Yeah, no, yeah, I understand what you're saying there around sort of the different roles and actually that there being a player to come from well, a younger player who's going to be an option who's going to grow into that role. But we don't talk about like unquantifiable things too much. But I'm gonna pose you that question now, right, about the new stadium and what that does, what that means, what you think is going to mean.
Well, I mean,
Often
I
in the
think
in
I think the
uh,
first thing you say is there's a quantifiable thing, which is it means more money.
it means more
And,
money for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that helps a lot. And that
And
helps with all
probably
the
some
yeah,
better views as well.
yes. Um, I think it's a tricky thing because the history of Everton is something that really sets them apart from a lot of the other clubs that are currently in their sort of at their competitive and economic level right now. And Goodison became a real representation of that history. But that's for good and for bad, right? Because it unquestionably served as a constant reminder for fans that this team now is not what this team was. And that the line between taking pride in that history and it curdling into negativity quite quickly was very thin in that park. Very thin. Um, the new park is nice in all the ways that nice new parks are nice, right? There's better amenities. It's a better experience. There's better views, more hospitality, more money. All of these things are involved. And I think more than anything, from a sort of a soft factors focus, this team needed to turn the page on the extended Ken Wright into Moshiri era. They needed to like move from one era to the next, and the last era ended quite poorly. And so having this big representative shift, change, demarcation point, end of what came before, beginning of what comes next, is nice, and it's helpful, and it's good, and I think it's been good for fans, and I think it's been good for the community, and I think it's been good for everybody's appreciation of the club to feel like, hey, we are all entering a new chapter together. Now, what I'll say about all that stuff is like, lose 5 in a row and you can throw your new chapter out the window. Like, that's just how fandom works. But so far, so far we haven't hit that point yet. So I think it has all come together quite nicely. I mean, it remains to be seen how long you can sustain the honeymoon period.
Mm. And so, like to actually mention those games and sort of the, as you mentioned, the honeymoon period in the new stadium. What have you made of the opening kind of results that you've seen, and the opening performances you've seen? Obviously, Leeds, Brighton, the win over Wolves, the draw
Wolves, which
against
was, yeah.
Villa.
Yeah, they've been good. They haven't been great, but they've been playing at a level that is firmly mid-table. And they've been doing it by both creating and conceding chances. And there are levels, this goes back to the Sean Dyche discussion, right? Where there are ways that you can play in which results justify the style. And on the other hand, there are ways that you can play in which the style does not justify the results, right? Like, you can try to play all the nice looking football you want. If you're losing a lot, you got to you got to do something different. You got to make a change. So to be at a point right now through the first, 4 or 5 games where the style is relatively fun to watch and the results are good and the underlying, performances are of a good team, not a great team, but like of a pretty good team. It all comes together in a way that is pleasant. It's nice. It's good to watch.
Yeah.
I think that there's room for improvement. Obviously, the defense is relatively porous. I think some of that will improve naturally when Branthwaite gets healthy and Michael Keane goes back to being on the bench, because Michael Keane is fairly cooked at this point in his career. Some of that hopefully gets better when you get Mikolenko healthy and you solve the left back and midfield problem in one fell swoop. They don't really have a right back. I mean, Asnu might be a right back one day. Right now, he's a guy who's going to play in cups and be a backup. That's fine. So you're not really going to solve the right back problem. You're still going to have a center back playing right back, as your first choice this season, but that's okay. As things go, I think, Moyes playing Jake O'Brien outright to eventually play him as center back it's like a time-honored David Moyes tradition. So, I think the performances have been pretty good, but there's also reason to believe that the really extreme defensive lightweightness will improve on its own, which is, lots of reasons for optimism.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in terms of the style of play, if Everton needed to play a different way in order to get results, I'm not saying that they shift back to sort of the approach we were talking about beforehand. Do you think the squad is composed of the right parts to enable them to do that, or at the moment, does this squad play the way in which
So I
it's
think to
going
some
to?
degree this squad plays the way it plays. Now I will
Yeah,
say that there are choices you can make to make this team more defensive if you so chose. Dwight McNeil, who was very, very good for this team when Sean Dyche was here, is, I think, a good player. Isn't playing now because they are choosing not to play a two-way winger, right? They're choosing not to play a winger who views their responsibility as, I get back behind the ball aggressively when we lose possession, and I do not break forward ahead of the ball. I bring the ball up the field with me, or I stay behind the ball. And so if you put him on the field to play more defensively, that is going to make this team more defensive. you're going to sacrifice Endai, assumingly, presumably to do that, because you're probably not going to sacrifice Grealish, and that has like real attacking ramifications. I mean, I think, um, ideally, again, talking about needing another midfielder, you would want another midfielder who could also have that same sort of impact on the club, and you don't really have that. You could do other things where you play three center backs, especially again when Branthwaite is back. Um, so there are some options here, not as much as you'd like, though.
Yeah, and coming on to the game itself, then I mean, like last season's Merseyside derbies felt like eventful kind of affairs. Obviously the one at Goodison, which I'm almost certain that we had a discussion about where I moaned and moaned and moaned and just had my Michael Oliver diatribe or whatever it was. And then there was the game at Anfield, which is like again a very tough kind of tight affair on the day and ultimately sealed with a goal by Diego Jota, of course, on the day. This season, I'm intrigued to see what those derbies offer us again. And I remember we actually avoided Liverpool avoided the early kickoff Merseyside derby, which would have been in a hurricane basically
That's
last
right. That's
season
right. Yeah.
against Sean Dyche, which I think that was a potential turning point actually in the season because we weren't doing too well at that. Well, weren't doing too well, but we were a little bit physically shaky at that point, and that would have been a interesting test, I think. But what are you expecting from the
Yeah.
game this weekend?
I think we're gonna have a little bit of a different feel to this one. I think,
Mm,
typically these derbies are like extremely physical, blood
yeah.
and thunder. You know, Pickford becoming everybody's villain for breaking Virgil van Dijk. They are
Tarkovsky, I'm gonna put
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, McAllister
And
nearly getting some sort of assaulted. Yeah.
I think for a long time, certainly for the last couple years, and certainly last year under Slot, really, when Liverpool were an extremely controlled team, and Everton were an extremely defensive team, it's set up to be that kind of a clash, right? Uh this year, Liverpool are not a control team, and Everton are not a team that's looking to sit back and defend and absorb. So I think you're going to get something a little wackier this year. Is my sort of general interpretation of where these teams are tactically. Look, Liverpool are a lot better than Everton, and I think that we've talked about the fullbacks. The fact that Everton can't defend in these wide spaces, and Liverpool are looking to fly up the field into these spaces, is a major problem. That said, the fact that Liverpool cannot defend their right fullback spot and their right flank, and Jack Grealish is out there, is also kind of a problem for Liverpool. And I suspect it is a back and forth game with a bunch of chances that ultimately Liverpool win because Liverpool are significantly better at converting those chances into goals than Everton are. But I think that it's gonna be a little wild. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be a much more interesting, yeah, kind of game than it has been for a number of years for that reason, as you mentioned. And I was going to get get your perspective on kind of um, I think there's lots of takes I think at the moment on exactly where Liverpool are and how they're doing. It seems to me like there's an attempt to build the plane whilst flying at the moment a little bit, and that's messy.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
I would also
but
say, like, it's not only an attempt to build the plane's going to be very different after this year. Like,
yeah,
part of what is creating the awkwardness for Liverpool, I think, is this is a team that is being built to be the team after Mo Salah. Well, Mo Salah is still on the team. It's not all that hard to figure out how all of these pieces fit together when there is no Salah, right? You can play Ekitike and Isak together fairly easily with Ritz behind them as a front three. Like, that works. You can't do that when, like, obviously Mo Salah is going to start every game. Um, like, I would be surprised if in the next several years Liverpool were not experimenting with a back three. Like, to me, that's what this talent, when you get a Frimpong and Kirkis as your fullbacks, suggests you want to do and where you want to go. But you're not going to do that when Gay's not there yet either. It's a team with a ton of talent in transition. And so because of that, this year they have problems in transition. they have they have real problems defending against teams that move the ball up the field against them because they're oftentimes playing with a very lightweight midfield and very attacking fullbacks. And I think it is possible that over the next month and a half, Liverpool's attack will click. And it will click to such a level that it is so scary for other teams. Other teams will basically be too packed in against that attack to counterattack well. And I think that is like the path that Liverpool takes to being a truly excellent team this year. But I mean, I think we're talking the day after they blew their third 2-goal lead of the season, this time to Atleti, and what you saw in that match in the Champions League, their first Champions League match, was Atleti spent 7 minutes getting run over because they decided to sit back and defend. Then they were down 2 goals and were like, oh, well, I guess we have to attack. And as soon as they were willing to go up and down against Liverpool, it was a much more even match. Now, I don't want to oversell it. It was like Atleti got the real run of the bounces to get 2 goals and draw that match and get back
Yeah,
into it. Like they were not better really than Liverpool over that stretch, but they were clearly closer to Liverpool when they were willing to go up and down with them than when they wanted to absorb pressure.
yeah.
And that to me, I think is Liverpool's real challenge this year.
Mm. And to your point, I think as well, what I saw last night was an attack that nearly clicked in on quite a few moments. To your point, and if it had done, I mean, I guess if it had done, many teams could say this, but if it had done, that game could easily have looked like 4 or 5-2 because of
Yep,
the some of the
absolutely.
quality of those attacks. But it's interesting because there's been a lot of discussion, obviously, around Salah, and I think from different sections of the media, different sections of the fan base, and it's awkward, right? Because you are you are in that situation where we're speaking about Grealish and getting the ball to Grealish. Very often, it's a smart thing to do to pass to Mo Salah because he will do things for you. He will create chances for others. And there has been this issue this season where he's just not getting anywhere near as much of the ball as he was. And there's okay, the Trent pipeline that is has suddenly disappeared. Uh, but again, even to myself, that seems kind of bizarre. I go, oh, okay, yes, Trent's not there, and I understand he did very particular kind of passing to Salah that was very beneficial to him, like just look up ball, and Salah's already made the run. But it seemed kind of inconceivable to me that the likes of Florian Wirtz and others can go should probably pass to Mo to Mo as well. But it's about figuring out the right kind of
That's right.
pass.
I think the thing that Trent really did that benefited Salah was because of his ability to get him the ball from all angles and in all ways, fullbacks really had to drop off of Salah. And so he would get the ball in extremely deep positions with the defense dropped off him. Now, early in his career, defenses had to drop off Salah because he would just torch them and go right by them if they didn't. It's not clear that post 30 Salah can still do that. And it's just sort of the case that over the last couple of years, he never had to. So it didn't matter. Um, and, it is absolutely a different thing with the likes of Wirtz being guys who are more effective creators in and around attacking areas than at moving the ball up the field. Trent just absolute genius virtuoso at passing the ball up the field. And they didn't really replace that. Usually you get that out of a midfielder. That's not what their midfield is. Um, you know, Van Dijk is sort of stepping up and doing more of that, which you can also sort of see the logic, right? Like if we have a really dangerous attack and we pin other teams really, really deep, then Van Dijk can step up a little further and play some
Mm.
more of those kind of line breaking passes. But
Sly a
also,
little bit as well as he's
yeah,
been asked.
I mean, I think that's why you've seen Szoboszlai get those
Yeah.
those minutes at right back. But he's not Trent. And as much as over the years Trent's defending became sort of a lightning rod at
Yeah.
Liverpool, Szoboszlai's not Trent from a defensive standpoint either. He's not a right back, and Trent was. It's and I also understand that some parts of the Liverpool fan base have been looking at Bradley and saying like, well, maybe he's the answer, he's the solution. I think it just all of it just undersells how special Alexander Arnold's skill set was.
Mhm.
Now, as you say, there's a lot of talent on this Liverpool team, right?
Yeah,
And they should be able to,
figure
you
it
know,
out.
right, figure it out. Or, it's like the old Moneyball thing, like, we'll replace him in the aggregate.
Mm.
But where and how Salah gets the ball, and maybe even if you want Salah to be getting the ball that much, changes
Yeah,
in the aggregate.
yeah.
And
This
they
is the
haven't
thing.
figured that out yet, that balance out yet.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's tricky because part of me thinks Salah could still have that level of influence if they figure out the right way to create to him. But then part of me thinks, oh, what's more important? Is it more important to figure out how to play together because you're the future. Um, and it seems as though Mo Salah is even being Mo Salah, I think he's moved into the stage of his career where he'd be quite happy to go, no, I will do what I need to do to make sure you're working because you're taking the mantle on from me. But it's funny at times because there in certain games where you think, oh well, I know how to unlock this game. It's usually by giving the ball to the best player or the best attacking player, and yeah, it's yet to click in that way. I was going to ask you just because I think particularly interested just before we wrap up, your opinions on what you've seen of Florian Wirtz since he's come to Liverpool because he seems to be somebody who I could have almost predicted that would be kind of like slightly a divisive, not divisive figure, not amongst the Liverpool fan base. I think Liverpool fans like love watching him, but there's this expectation of like when is the output going to come like but to
Yeah,
your point
it's
we just spoke about players who don't necessarily always contribute the direct output but then are instrumental at pulling things around.
so what I'd say about
How do
Wirtz
you
is
think he's
that
done?
in Germany he did contribute
He did,
direct output,
yes,
goals and
yeah.
assists, and clearly he's a guy who, when you have him operating in and around the final third, can do that, does do that. I also think his role on this current Liverpool
Different.
side is not that, right. And
Mm.
and and again, I think this is the awkwardness of the passage of time, right. I think if you imagine a front three of Isak, Ikitike, and Wirtz, however they are distributed across the front line, his job will be goals and assists as part of that group. Right now, in this transition year, asking him to do a lot of sort of ball progression, a lot of receiving passes and turning and playing the ball upfield, a lot of pressing, to be fair, um, is you're not going to get value for it given what you paid for him, right? But I think what you paid for is the guy over the next 5, 6, 7, hopefully 10 years. And so it's okay if he plays a role for a year in transition where you don't max out his value.
Yeah.
That said, I'm not like, if that's what you're doing with him, like, it's not super clear to me that, like, you don't want Soberslide necessarily in there.
Mm.
It's like, not that Soberslide is an amazing player, but if you need a midfielder to sort of be adding some defensive heft alongside Gravenberch
I'd rather that be Szoboszlai. Yeah, yeah,
than
exactly. Yeah.
McAllister.
Yeah, this is a similar thing when McAllister joined actually as well. A similar thing, and also a very similar, especially thinking stylistically about how they play. When Thiago joined, we had the first season he joined, he was running around and throwing in tackles because he had to, because that was kind of the balance of our midfield. And I was pulling my hair out, like
Right.
one because I knew the guy's injury record, and then two because I was thinking like, why are we wasting this? Like, there's this amazing creative player, and we're asking him to try and throw tackles in and asking for huge defensive work rate. And I absolutely don't want that to be the case. I mean, I know Vids does that anyway, like so that work rate is there, but it seems a massive waste. But I think you're right. I think I wouldn't be surprised if this is a foundation year, figure out how to play because this is a new role to him. He doesn't play this role didn't play it for Leverkusen, didn't play it for the national team either. And it was interesting to me actually last night. There was a period, maybe 20 minutes in the game where some changes were made, and he, for the first time, went onto the left and looks more comfortable because
Yeah,
that's the way
absolutely.
he's played.
I sort of like, when I look at Liverpool's future, what I see is those three guys you bought this summer being the front three. And I think that, like, they're gonna call like Wirtz and Ekatike the wingers and Isak the striker, and but like in possession it'll kind of be Wirtz as a 10 pulling the string behind those two guys, and out of possession maybe he'll be like out on the wing. And I think it all like I think there's a lot of easy ways to picture that working, but all of that works a lot more sort of seamlessly as opposed to playing a team where you've got a right winger and he plays on the right wing and he is one of the best in the world on the right wing and he's always going to be out there on the right wing. And I think that the last thing that I think that's interesting about Liverpool this year is like, how is Salah going to age and how are they going to handle it? Like there's there's three ways that great players age. One way is they just get bad very quickly and then they stop playing. But if they keep playing, there's like kind of like two ways that you can think about it. One is like they continue to play a lot and they just do a little bit less on the field all the time. And I think one thing you've seen from Salah this year is like it's very striking. His take-ons are extremely down. And maybe that's age, maybe that's a rut, whatever. But like it's a thing. The other option is look, you still are like more or less the player that you were when you were younger. You just play a lot less minutes and you only get sort of that peak performance somewhat less. And it kind of seems to me that Liverpool are like down the first path with Salah, where he just always plays, but will maybe be doing somewhat less. And like, I do wonder when I watch them if maybe the second way isn't better.
I think Slot has alluded to that a little bit actually, that there will be games where Mo Salah doesn't play 90 minutes and doesn't enjoy it. And
Right,
but
exactly.
he's just going to have to do that, right? And yeah, it's interesting you mentioned how players edge because I think there's been all these questions around Salah, understandably so, given sort of the levels he sets. And then at the same time, you see, yeah, Virgil van Dijk at age 34 or whatever, a very different position. And genuinely, yeah, I don't think he seems
I
better
think
than
it's
ever.
interesting
He's
if you
being
watch.
asked to do more than ever
Yeah,
as well.
I think it's interesting if you watch Van Dijk. You can see the ways in which he's not quite athletically what he was, but you can also just like he's so good at compensating.
He's figured out ways to deal with it. Yeah. Yeah.
I will tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of like the last 5 years of John Terry's career, to be honest, where Terry similarly like lost a little bit of the athleticism, but was just very, very good at compensating for it. And the thing that ends up happening is like 2 or 3 times a year, like he's going to do something that seems really, really dumb, right? Like just because like the way he gets caught cheating, right? Like he's cheating to make up for his athleticism and he's so good at it that he almost never gets caught. But then
Yeah.
like a couple of times a year, you're going to get caught. And like you'll have like 3 days of really like, huge media cycle over like, is Van Dijk done?
Mhm.
And then he'll go back to just being great because he very, very rarely gets caught. But like you
Yeah.
could definitely see the way his game is evolving in that direction.
Oh yeah, and then I could if we draw PSG again, I can imagine there's some occasion where someone like Barcola or
Yeah.
like Desiree Doué, the young upstarts, they have the ability to make him look dumb,
Yeah.
and or to go, oh, you're cheating,
Right.
I'm gonna
Right.
prove
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Whereas the vast majority, yeah, you're right, he's able to. But it's just been interesting this season. I think he's been asked to do more than ever because of this more kind of open nature of Liverpool. Um, some of the games we played so far very physical, very intense, and he stood up to it. And then to your point, he's being asked to do a lot more in terms of his creative game as well. So it's just been interesting to see how he's aging into his role as well. But Mike, I'm sure we could actually talk about this for a long time because there's lots of very interesting questions actually about the sides at this stage of the season. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on as always. And as you said at the start of the pod, good to talk to you in a positive like mood
Yeah.
about Everton, right? It's like in
Yeah.
this,
I'm happy to do it. I didn't have to like prepare myself this time. I didn't have to like
yeah, there's no
like
drinks outside of
yeah,
the
right.
of the camera frame. Yeah,
That's a pleasure. Love it. I love doing this. I'm happy to do it all the time.
thank you so much. And did you want to actually like
Oh yeah, I should do
do
my
any plugs
uh,
for Double Pivot as well? Yeah.
yeah, Double Pivot podcast. We do one free pod a week, one subscriber pod a week, sometimes two subscriber pods a week.
Mm.
And then everybody should check out my day job at cbssports.com/soccer, where we cover all things soccer and broadcast the Champions League and all Serie A and all this other good stuff. Tons of soccer over at CBS in America.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on again, Mike. Really, really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.